Peace. I just wanted to take a moment and build a little bit about knowledge. And in my experience, I've often heard people speak on knowledge just in terms of data or information. Now, knowledge, even though data and information are elements of it, knowledge is much more vast. And, knowledge is a compound word that has know and ledge in it. So to know the ledge is also reflective of knowledge. Knowledge is also awareness. Knowledge is consciousness. Knowledge is the underlying significance. Knowledge is principalities. Knowledge has various different elements to it. It's very vast, and it's just not relegated to data or information. A phrase that you may often hear us say is knowledge is the foundation. So I wanted to share today about what knowledge is the foundation means in practice. When we talk about a foundation, we're talking about the basis or the premise. A premise is the basis upon which a conclusion or an argument is drawn. So, in other words, when we say knowledge is the foundation, what we're saying is whatever statement or premise that we establish, that we draw our conclusions from, knowledge is the governing principle we use to establish that premise or to make that statement. In other words, we consider the data, the information, our own personal experiences, which is to know the ledge of our own experiences. We consider that there are other people, or we are aware that there are other people that don't share our own personal experiences. And we put all of that together, and that's when we set the foundation or make our statement in regards to the type of conclusions that we've drawn based upon all of that data, that information, our personal experiences, being conscious that there are other people that have other experiences. That is the basis upon which our premise is established. Now, sometimes we may have people who are very well intended, who have drawn valid conclusions, but we may not have the opportunity to even arrive at sharing those conclusions simply because the premise was not sound or we didn't use knowledge as that foundation. In other words, it would be no different than a person just making a statement, bananas are good. Now, if that was the premise, and the conclusion that we wanted to draw from that premise was the health benefits of bananas and potassium in our diet and this, that, and the third, because we just said bananas are good, we've automatically limited our ability to have that conversation about our conclusions simply because now we're going to have banana haters in the left come out and say bananas aren't good. And their position is just as valid as yours. You may have people that come out and say, well, bananas aren't better than apples. Because by you saying bananas are good, you've implied that they might be good or better than other fruits, or that they may even be the apex fruit of the fruit group. You may even have people who want to have this philosophical discussion about the phallic symbolism of bananas and how they support and reinforce patriarchal domination and misogyny and this, that, and the third. You may have that type of conversation, but because your premise was faulty from the door, you got to straighten out all of these other conversations on the side before you even have an opportunity, if you have the opportunity, to share the conclusion that you've arrived at as far as the health benefits of bananas. So when we say knowledge is the foundation, what we're saying is when we establish our premise, we already take that into consideration. We consider the people who may want to argue about bananas versus apples. We consider people who may just not like bananas or may be even allergic to bananas. We even consider the people who may want to have this philosophical discussion about the phallic symbolism of bananas. So when we set our premise or we make our initial statement, taking all of that data or information into consideration, being considerate and conscious that you have other people who have different type of experiences than us, we set our premise like this. We may say something along the lines of, in my personal experience with bananas, I found this to be, the benefits. I know that some people may be allergic to bananas. I know some people may not like bananas, but there are other sources of potassium that you can get. I know that, this, that, and the third. This has been my experience. What has been your experiences? So by approaching it from that perspective, you've been considerate and sensible enough to recognize that you have people that come from different angles. People have different experiences, and you've included them in the conversation. The reason I'm even sharing this is because I see people who take the same approach of not establishing a sound premise or foundation when they're talking about other subject matters. I've seen people say stuff like black women need to do this, implying that all black women need to do this, implying that they know all black women, or white people speak like that, implying that all white people speak like that, implying that they know all white people, or making statements about children are like this, implying that they know all children, implying that all children do A, B, or C. Now, before you even have an opportunity to share anything, you have to straighten out those conversations, because you're going to have some black women that object immediately from the door because they don't fit in that box you just put them in. You may have people who know black women that don't fit in that box who object to what you're saying. You may have people that don't even want to listen to what you have to say after that because your premise was faulty to begin with. Your foundation wasn't sure or sound. So when we say knowledge is the foundation, we're talking about we strive to shore that up before we speak about something with a surety. By assuring other people that we've considered the angles that they may come from or the experiences that they may have before we even start speaking on things and the type of conclusion that we've drawn. So, like I said, if we're speaking about some black women, because that's all you can actually do, because you don't know all, we say it in those terms. That's the most accurate and effective way to communicate it. In my personal experience with some black women, I've noticed this. What has been some of your experience? Because I know that this does not reflect all black women. In my personal experience with some white people, I've experienced this. I know that this does not reflect every single white person. What has been your experience? So when you communicate it that way, you're including people. You're being considerate enough to know that I know my ledge. I know that my personal experience is not reflective of everybody's personal experiences, and so I'm not going to communicate it that way. In order to utilize knowledge as the foundation, we need to utilize knowledge as the governing principle of the premises that we establish and how we draw our conclusions. That is the most effective way to communicate to people, as well as giving people an opportunity to even listen to what it is that we have to say. Like I said, knowledge being the foundation means that we consider the data, we consider the information, we know our own ledge, and we're conscious and aware that other people have other experiences out there. So I will, this was inspiring, it was empowering, it was educating for those of you who want to be a lot more effective in the way in which we communicate, so that we can minimize a lot of these side conversations. So we even have a chance to communicate to people what it is that we've drawn or the conclusions that we've arrived at based upon the data or the information or what we've been made aware of or what we're conscious of. Peace.